Robomate Plus, India's largest curriculum-based study app. Download the app now.
Hello dear students. When you overcome smaller problems, what you get is victory. And when you face bigger challenges and overcome bigger difficulties, what you get is victory. This is Vikit Jain and we are here to discuss what are the basic tips and tricks which will help you excel in your history and civics paper of ICSE board examination 2020. Let us begin. We will be discussing certain parameters with respect to time management, with respect to how the paper will be coming in your entire exam and how you are supposed to attempt them. To begin with, your entire question paper, which is an 80-mark question paper, is divided into two sections. The first section, the first part, is the compulsory part that comprises of two sections, one which is of civics and the second one which is of history. The civics part you need to attempt 10 questions, as well as in the history part also you need to attempt 10 questions. Please observe that both these questions, both these sections are compulsory and you do not have any options in these questions. But the next part is the optional section, wherein the first section, which has the civics questions, you need to attempt any 2 questions out of 3. Followed by, in the history section, you need to attempt any 3 questions out of the 5 questions given in the question paper. So to summarize the entire question paper, the first part is the compulsory section, whereas the second part is the optional section. When we talk about the marks weightage and marks division, please understand that in history, we do not have any chapter-wise weightage. But if you will observe clearly in your entire 80 marks question paper, you have the compulsory section and you have the optional section, which we have already discussed. But apart from that, your history section is for 50 marks and your civics section is for 30 marks. Students, we usually have a tendency that before the history paper, we tend to gulp up and mug up a lot of history and we focus a lot on the history part. And most of the times, the civics part gets ignored. But if you'll observe, the civics part comes for 30 marks, which means for 30 marks, you need to study only 5 chapters, wherein for the 50 marks, you need to study 15 chapters. So the common myth, that is civics part is difficult to score, civics part is difficult to study as compared to history, is not the correct one. So if you'll perfect your civics part first and then jump on to history section, that will ensure you better results. For example, if you'll confirm, if you'll thorough those 5 chapters of the civics, your 30 marks will be going nowhere. Your main objective in the board is not to finish up everything and gulp up everything, but how you can grab the maximum amount of mark with minimum amount of effort. When I talk about time management, that is how to attempt the entire question paper. The 80 marks question paper comes for 2 hours, that is 120 minutes. So if we logically divide the amount of time that we have with the plan that we need to attempt all the questions properly and also saving some amount of time for rechecking and recorrection, etc. The first section, that is the compulsory section, the civics as well as the history part, should be attempted within the first 40 minutes. 15 minutes dedicated to the civics part, wherein you have to attempt 10 questions, and 25 minutes to be dedicated to the history part, wherein also you have to attempt 10 questions. Once again, these questions are compulsory. The next section that we need to attempt, you need to understand that each 10-mark answer should be given a minimum of 15 minutes, or rather I'd say each question can be given a maximum of 15 minutes of time allotment, because the more time you spend on an answer, the lesser time you will get to attempt any other answer. So the civics part, wherein you have to attempt 2 answers, should be finished within the next 30 minutes, followed by the history section, wherein you have to attempt 3 structured answers. You need to finish it within the next 45 minutes. So calculating the entire amount of time, you will have 5 more minutes left with you to spare, wherein you can do the rechecking, the correction, etc, etc. And that will sum up your entire 2 hours, 120 minutes of history and civics paper. One common question that all the ICSE students have is what is to be studied for the ICSE History Civics Board exam. Now one thing that you need to understand, students, is questions may not be asked from the book that you are referring to, as there is no prescribed textbook by the ICSE Council. But the ICSE Council has prescribed a list of topics which we call as the scope of syllabus. So if the preparation is done from the scope of syllabus, then trust me, the ICSE exams are not tough to crack. These are one of the most simplest and easiest exams if you are well prepared and if you are confident enough to write answers to. Another common question that students come across is, are keywords important? It goes without saying that yes, keywords are the most important part of your answers, and the examiners will give you marks based on the keywords that you write. Most often we tend to miss out those keywords and then we write our own words into the answer. Though it means the same, the impact of the answer changes. Say for example, General Assembly is the main organ of the United Nations, which is true. But the actual keyword that the examiner is looking for is General Assembly is the main representative and deliberative organ of the United Nations. So these are the words that will separate your paper from an average paper and will help you to score better. Another question that we usually come across is, are marks deducted for spelling errors, for spelling mistakes? Now, since history and civics paper is not a language paper, it's not English, that your marks can be straight away deducted for spelling or grammar errors. But if your spelling errors lead to change in the meaning of the statements, then that will definitely affect your marks and your marks might be deducted. No matter even if there's a slight mistake such as interchanging of the alphabets or not writing a particular alphabet may sometimes change the entire meaning of this statement. Also, what we usually come across, the common confusion among students is that what are we supposed to write? Are these important words really that important? Dear students, please understand, when it comes to history and civics, the only things that matter are these important keywords. Otherwise, there is no difference between writing your own statements in history and writing your own made up stories in English or in any other subject. So you need to start being precise and use those technical words, especially in civics, which will help you get marks. Say for example, we have a statement here, the president elects the PM. Now at the back of your mind, your thoughts might be, yes, this statement is correct, wherein we all know that the president makes the prime minister sign and the president gives him permission, president gives him power, the prime minister takes oath in front of the president. All these stories, true. But the actual statement or the actual word that is required here is that the president appoints the prime minister. So there's a huge difference in the entire statement and its meaning when you change those words. So you need to be extremely careful when you're writing your paper. Now when it comes to preparation, how are you supposed to prepare for your history civics exam? The very first and the most basic point here is, please stick to the scope of syllabus. You need not try to mug up the entire book. Now, jokes apart, some things that you might have already been aware of, that you have been studying since the beginning of the year. So you are already quite well aware of the scope that has been prescribed by the ICSE Council. Take example, the chapter World War I. So when you talk about World War I, we have the causes and the consequences which are a part of the scope. So when I mean these are the part of the scope, I technically mean questions will be asked from these two sections only. The events are not important as far as the board exam is concerned. But however, in order to keep a continuity and in order to understand the chapter, you will have to go through these sections as well. So for the sake of preparation of the exam, you need to focus on the scope. But when you are reading the chapter, when you are understanding the chapter, reading the entire chapter becomes important. Now while you are trying to revise, please try to recollect all the important points like you're brainstorming the entire chapter at one go. Because this will help you to recall the entire chapter in a very small amount of time. Now, history exam is a written exam, so you can't just rely on oral recitations. The practice has to be done in a writing manner. Now when I say writing, solving question papers is the most important and the most simple options that we already have. But however, we also have a tendency that we tend to stick to last year's question paper, last year's question paper. At times we go for 10 years question paper, we purchase so and so booklets from the market and then we try to solve them. Now every year ICSE Council has updated, revised or skipped some part of the scope. So which technically means your this year's scope of syllabus will not match any scope of syllabus that was beyond 5 years. So solving last 10 years paper won't be much valuable to you. So rather than wasting your time there, use Step Up, which has been already provided to you. So solving the last 10 years question paper, you might come across many of those questions which are not relevant for your particular year. So please be very focused and precise with the scope of syllabus when you are sitting to revise. Now when you are trying to attempt the lengthy answers, the long answer type questions, the optional sections, we all are aware that in the history section, you need to attempt only 3 questions out of 5. Now out of these 5 questions, usually 2 questions are from the world history section and 3 questions are from the Indian history section. So you need to start analyzing and you need to start understanding which are the chapters, which are the sections that you will be able to best attempt and give your best pointers in the exam so that you can get marks. Choose your lengthy answers very confidently, and once you're confident, attempt it with full swing. Do not be in a confusing manner wherein you have to choose between, if I'll write this answer, I don't know some of the points from these particular answers. Then you tend to jump to another question and then you start thinking once again. Please avoid doing any such confusing work during your exams. When you start writing the answers, make sure you elaborate all the important points necessary and you don't elaborate on those points which are not at all required. Stick to whatever the question has been asked. Try to write your answer in a very precise and analytical manner and do not just keep on writing for the sake of extending the length of the answer. Writing big points won't fetch you marks, but writing correct and important points will fetch you marks. And when you talk about writing important points, especially in history, the chronology has to be perfect. I need to understand which event occurred first, which event occurred then, and then I need to present them in the answer accordingly. And when you write these answers, you need to highlight the dates or the names or the important keywords that are required with the pencil. Please start putting yourself into that habit where you automatically have a pencil with you and you start underlining those answers. Now for that evergreen question, that are dates important? Dear students, when you write the perfect date, the examiner, the corrector has complete confidence on your paper that this particular student is well aware and is well versed with the topics that he has written. Now that will make your paper different from n number of students' paper who are not writing dates. So writing dates becomes very important if you want to fetch more marks. At the same time, if you write wrong dates, then marks will be deducted. So you need to be careful with that as well. And please ensure you're having some form of uniformity when you're writing the paper. We do understand the excitement when you are starting the paper and also the trauma when you're about to finish the paper. It's quite natural actually. But the point is, most of the times when we see the papers, the first few pages are very beautiful, very crisp, tidy, and by the time the student reaches the end of the supplement, it's all gibberish. So try to avoid such form of untidiness, cancellations, overwriting of answers, cancellation of a page, cancellation of an answer, and try to make your paper as neat as possible. When it comes to the section of the early nationalist leaders and the assertive leaders, the 6 leaders that we have, the 3 trios of each chapter, the early nationalists as well as the assertives. Their early life is not to be studied as a part of scope of syllabus for the exam sake. However, their contributions for the Congress, their contribution for the spread of nationalism, their contributions in the Indian War of Independence, all these pointers becomes important. So you need to start going through them as well. A lot of chapters, a lot of topics have certain images of great leaders, have certain images of the symbols of certain organizations, and there is a scope, there is a chance that there might be a picture study that might come up in the exam. Say for example, they'll give you the Nazi symbol and there'll be a 1 mark question that will go like, identify the flag. As simple as that. Or there'll be rather a symbol of WHO and the question will be, identify the organization, name the headquarters of the organization, etc. etc. So picture based study is also very important. Now talking about the D-Day, the most important event in your lifetime right now. The ICSE board exam starts on 27th of February, which is a Thursday. On 6th of March, you students will be writing your English 2 paper. On 7th of March, some students who have opted for a French or Sanskrit will be writing their respective second language paper. Now, irrespective whether if you have chosen Sanskrit or not, French or not, on an average, all the students have at least 3 days to prepare for their history civics paper, which is on 11th of March, which is a Wednesday. So how do you go about preparing for the big event? Most of the students tend to have this hatred towards history, majorly because you need to write those lengthy answers, you need to mug up those lengthy answers, etc. Like you have so many chapters, you have so many contexts, you have so many dates to remember. So students tend to get a bit panicky. So the first and foremost thing that you're supposed to do is do not panic whatsoever. You got 3 days before the big day. So you can plan out your entire revision and then perform your exam accordingly. Now when I talk about revision, your revision has to be written as well. Now don't get into that lazy atmosphere wherein you're thinking, I have 3 days holiday so I can rest for 1 day and then I will start rushing up with the chapters on the next 2 days. It won't work. Plan out how you are going to finish your entire revision in the first 2 days itself. Let the last day of the holiday, or rather I'll say let the last day of the study holiday be very peaceful, calm, and wherein you are trying to revise everything and trying to go through n number of question papers as well. As far as history and civics paper is concerned, we do understand that it's a theoretical paper. So a lot of stuff has to be memorized, has to be remembered. So focus on remembering more rather than creating your own stories in the paper. Now, as we already discussed with respect to previous year's question paper, job for you is already been made easier. You have already been provided with a book called as Step Up. Step Up basically contains the important questions which have already come in the board exams from the last 10 years. And in this book, we have already skipped and omitted all those questions which are not a part of your current scope of syllabus. So you have this entire neat and tidy thing ready which you can use, and the questions are chapter wise. So once you are thorough with a particular chapter, you can start going through the previous year's questions again and again. Now, after you are done with your exam, please do not attempt any form of post-mortem of the question paper, like what have you written in this for this answer, what did your friend write, etc, etc, because it does not make any sense now. If you would have done this in the first exam, in the previous exam, it would have made some form of sense because you could incorporate those changes, those technicalities in the board exams. But this is the last time you're going to write this paper. You're not going to attempt your board exam once again, obviously. So there is no point in you trying to analyze what has gone wrong after you're coming out of the examination hall. So don't sit and cry over spilt milk and don't try to dwell, okay, I should have done this better, etc, etc. Rather, once you are finished with the paper, stay calm, bring on your energy back and start getting bugged up for your next exam. Now the most important part is that in our history and civics paper, there is no chapter wise weightage that has been prescribed by the council. So therefore, skipping any chapter might lead to deduction of marks because at least in the compulsory section, there might be some questions of those chapters which you might have omitted. So risking any chapters for ICSE Board 10 standard history and civics is always risky. So do not try to take this risk. Some pointers that you need to follow on the day of the examination is you get a 15 minutes buffer before you start writing the 2 hours paper. Now in that 15 minutes, what we usually do is we tend to read the question paper and then we sit, we look here and there and we enjoy the breeze and all. Try avoiding all those things. Try to concentrate your entire focus at one point and it will start analyzing the question paper. Now dear students, please understand the first section is the compulsory section. When I say compulsory, you do not have a choice there. It is as simple as that either you know the answer or you don't know the answer. So if you know the answer, well and good, you'll be able to write it. If you don't know the answer, you can't do anything about it. But where you are actually supposed to crack your brain is the optional section, wherein you need to attempt any 2 out of 3 in the civics section and any 3 out of 5 in the history section. Which are the best possible answers that you can write in the most elaborative way and in the least possible time. These are the things that you are supposed to decide and understand in the first 15 minutes rather than wasting your time. A few very silly but yet important things. Please do not mismatch the number of questions and answers. Please write the correct answer number which are matching to the question number of your question paper, and do not misplace any of your answer booklets as well. Ensure that your entire answer booklet is very neat and tidy, and don't tend to change, make any sort of last minute changes in the question paper. As per the time management that we already discussed, the last 5 minutes that we have is for us to recheck whatever we have written, not to add something new that we have not yet written. So don't be under that impression that, if you tend to skip so many answers, or if you think you don't know, say some number of answers, you're going to write all those answers in the last 5 minutes. Last 5 minutes has to be kept separately for you to sit, relax, and then look at the beauty of the paper that you have already written. If at all you don't know any answer, leave spaces and then jump on to the next answer. And by the end, if you realize that you are still not able to write that particular answer, take a pencil and strike it out. Do not leave any blank spaces, or do not leave any form of blank pages in between your answers. One question that students usually ask, or students usually tend to follow this rule, is that they try to attempt the lengthier answers first, or they try to attempt the civics sections first, or they tend to change the order of the question paper. Please do not do that. No matter what, try following the order that has been given in the question paper, because it becomes easier for the examiner to correct. And one silly point which is compulsory: every question on a new page. Do not make a mix and match, right? Like you have question number 1A on the first side of the first page, then you have immediately question number 2, then you have question number 3. We have a lot of pages in the answer booklet, so please ensure you utilize it to the maximum best way possible. Now for your reference, here is a sample question paper as per the prescribed ICSE Council. If you'll observe, you have the very first section, which is the compulsory section that belongs to the civics part. You have the first 10 questions which are 1 mark each. Now when I say 1 mark, you need to be very crisp and clear, and you need to elaborate the points which are required. Usually if the answer is for 1 mark, how many points are we supposed to write? You need to be as crisp and as elaborative as possible. It is not such that, if it's a 1 mark question, you need to write only 1 point. When I say 1 point, I do not mean one sentence, that is one sentence and a full stop in the end. When I say 1 point, I mean it might be a point that comprises of 3 to 4 lines. It might be a pointers that might explain my answers in 2 sections, fine. But your answer needs to justify the question given. Always safe for a 1 mark answer, try giving 2 reasons, or try justifying the question with 2 points if it's a 1 mark answer. Followed by, you have the history section which goes for 2 marks each. Now in certain questions, you need to understand certain points, certain keywords which are very important. Like for example, here we have the very first question: how did the Indian rulers lose their sovereignty due to the subsidiary alliance? Now when we try to write the answers, we write certain conditions of subsidiary alliance, that the Indian rulers had to submit all their foreign relations. One person from the British army was stationed in the Indian rulers had to look after the British troops, etc. But one important point that we tend to miss here is writing about who planned the subsidiary alliance. Lord Richard Wellesley becomes very important part of the answer. Similarly, next we have what was the objective of Ilbert Bill. We tend to write the entire elongated history about Ilbert Bill, etc. And then in the end we tend to forget to write the most important person. Sir C.P. Ilbert was the person who introduced the bill. So these small pointers becomes very important. Similarly, one such confusing example that we have here is question number E. Which act was referred to as Black Act? Most of the students confuse this Black Act with Black Hands that belongs to chapter World War I, the Union of Death that planned the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. But here, Black Act, this is not a question from the contemporary section. This is a question from the Indian section, that is, Black Act was none other than your Rowlatt Act. So you need to be very crisp, you need to be careful when you are preparing for the exams as well. Jumping on to the next section, that is your lengthy, the structured questions. Each structured question, dear students, is for 10 marks. Now this 10 marks bifurcation might interchange. The most common bifurcation that we have around is 3, 3, 4. That is one question for 3 marks, one question for 3 marks and one question for 4 marks. That is, you will have question, say for example, you will have question number 5, 5A, 5B, 5C, all belonging to a particular topic. But there might be certain internal changes as well. As in here you can see in question number 3 you have subsection A, which is technically for 7 marks. And then internal they have another division. You have union list for 2 marks, you have state list for 3 marks and you have the concurrent list for 2 marks. If you will see the next question, that is question number 4, with reference to the president's power to declare national emergency, discuss the following. Each of the pointers that they have mentioned. So instead of 3, 3, 4, they have gone for a varied division. You have 2 marks, one subsection, you have another subsection for 2 marks and then you have the next 2 subsections for 3 marks each. So you need to be careful with respect to the marks weightage and write the required number of points accordingly in order to justify the marks. Now let us have a look at this particular question from the chapter Supreme Court. Please observe the first sub question, original jurisdiction, is for 3 marks. Now when we talk about writing 3 points for 3 marks, what we usually do is write 3 examples of cases. Say for example, one case that is central government versus state government. The second example, second point that I'll write is state government versus state government and so on. Now in this scenario, what I did was I did not justify 3 points or 3 cases. What I gave was 3 examples of the same point that falls under interstate or center state relationships. My ideal answer here would be original jurisdiction is first one, any case that involves violation of fundamental rights. Second point, any case that involves interpretation of the constitution. And third case is any case that involves interstate and center state relationships, wherein I am explaining each of these cases with one example, and that is how I am supposed to justify my answer. And this is what 3 points exactly means. It does not simply mean 3 sentences or 3 statements. Moving on to the next section, as we already discussed, here we have one picture based question wherein you are first supposed to identify the person in the photograph, which will definitely give you 1 marks. This person in the photograph is Bipin Chandrapal. As we already discussed that the early life of these leaders are not a part of the scope of syllabus. So none of the questions are asked from his early life. Whatever has been asked is basically his contribution with respect to the sense of nationalism, or with respect to his contribution in the Congress, or his contribution with respect to improvement of the country. Next, once again we have 2 more examples. You have one question that talks about the Indian National Congress in 1930 resolved to launch the civil disobedience movement. And with respect to the context of civil disobedience movement, they have asked the further questions. The most basic marks distribution that was possible, you have 3, 4 and 3 respectively. In a similar manner, you have the question from World War I, Treaty of Versailles, as it is. Now, one more important example that we have here is question number 9. You need to identify the symbol that is present here. This is basically World Health Organization, and then if you'll observe, this answer alone, that is the name of the organization alone, will fetch you 1 mark. The rest of the marks have been divided into various other functions and working of this particular organization. Now, my dear students, you need to understand that the only thing that will help you overcome your fears of history, that will help you achieve the goals that you want, the marks that you want, is your confidence and your skills. So be brave, be bold, be confident and rock the exams.
Thank you for watching this video lecture. To watch more such interesting videos, attempt tests and to get instant analysis, download the Robomate Plus app now.